Hey you, it's Jess here and welcome to another journaling video. I actually filmed this portion a while ago, if you can tell by the nails and the lighting, and also me at the intro there just trying to say we're going back in time for when I started this June spread. So this video is going to be a catch-up of some full page reviews that I did at the beginning of my reading journal for 2024. If you've seen the 2024 setup, if you haven't, it's on my channel. I'll make sure to try and link it now in the cards if I can. But yeah, I only recently set up a 2024 reading journal, and I read a lot of really awesome books this year that I really wanted to showcase instead of waiting till 2025. And I also wanted to try out the whole thing, wanted to try it out, be creative, have some fun. I feel like it's never too late to start. So this is some catch up that we're doing. We've done I started this review very at the beginning. This is like my first proper page that I did other than my Proust reading tracker. That was my very first page. This is sort of my second page, and I was having fun with the Dune series because I read the 6 books that Frank Herbert wrote this year. After seeing part 2 of the movies, I was like, finally I'm going to finish and get into Dune. And this is actually what sparked my reading on a Kindle, because the year before I tried to get into Dune reading the book, the physical book, but I found it really hard. So Locke was like, well, I have all the Dune books written by Frank on my Kindle, so I started reading the Kindle at night to read Dune, and this really changed up my whole reading routine this year, because now I could do audiobooks during the day and Kindle books at night, and it's just, I've read so many more books because of it. But anyway, what I meant is that so you've seen me do the setup, you've seen me do September and October, but of course there's some stuff I wanted to have before we got into the monthly things. I wanted to give some of the books that I read this year that due, and this is most of them. There's not really, I left out a couple of ones, especially novellas that I had read, but this is the majority of what I read in the beginning of the year. So we're kind of filling in for pre-September because it took me a couple of months to read all of the Dune books, of course, and you'll see in the other reviews that we're going to do, we have groups of books mostly, and these are mostly connected series as well. So with this Dune one, I just had this cool idea in my head, what if I did sort of the circle planet look in the middle, and then color it all in black to be like space. And I didn't have any tombos or anything at this point, I believe. This was very early on. I had just gotten the notebook in, and this was my first playing around with it. So I went through my collection of planner goodies, and I found that I had this Pentel Touch pen, and I tested it in the back and it doesn't bleed through. So I thought I could color all this black in with this. It's not perfect, as you can see. And I still don't have a black Tombow, and I should probably get one because I think it'd be much easier and faster to color it in with that. But you know what, I just made do with what I had on hand, and I think actually kind of has a cool look. It's sort of I don't know, I use a white pen, gel pen later to add some stars and dots, and I felt like it's sort of spacey, steel looking, as if there's blurred stars in the background or something like that. So I don't mind the sketchy look of it. Sketchy. But yeah, I also don't have anything to do circles with. I know I've seen a few journaling people who have circle stencils, but I didn't have any, so I broke out a drinking glass and just traced that, and it ended up being a good size, I think. So this would give me Dune in the center, and then I could put my reviews around the outside. And I love the way it came together. I will say I'm also going to use a fair bit of fan art in this video, and I will try and link all the artists down below, especially their Instagrams, because I saved most of this fan art from Instagram, and I made sure to screenshot their accounts. So I will have a list of artists down below if you want to check their art out, because now I am also bringing in this beautiful fan art of Paul from, well, Timothy Chalamet Paul for this, because I thought their painting was so beautiful and I thought it'd be perfect down the bottom here. I actually cut it in half. There's actually like a night, the space sky on top of it, and I cut it up to lay it across the bottom. But yeah, so I will have that person linked down below, and I'll try and make a list of like related to who drew what. But if you're looking for the artists, they will be listed. I try and do that to reference, the other artists, because their work is so beautiful not to be known. But yeah, so we should talk about Dune for a second. Yes, I only read the first 6 books written by Frank, and then by the time I finished the 6th book, I wasn't invested enough to bother reading Brian's books. He wrote 2 more to finish the series. And it was interesting because I was reading some comments like it says that he used Frank's notes to finish it, and then other people don't believe that he did. I don't know. Either way, I just went on Wikipedia and read the synopsis for Brian's final 2 Dune books, and I was honestly like, well, the way the series was going, I don't think it would have been worth finishing them. I feel like if you're really interested in it, it'd be worth finishing the story, but I found the ending to sound very... it felt very fan service, in my opinion. But I won't go into it because, we don't want to spoil the ending. But I will say, I think if you're thinking about reading Dune, at least read possibly the first 3 books. I thought Dune, Dune Messiah, and Children of Dune were actually pretty good. And I enjoyed what happened in them. And then it kind of goes off the rails at God Emperor of Dune for me, even though that's the wackiest stuff, you know what I mean, that happens in those books. It didn't quite work out for me, and I will have my written reviews in at the end when we do a flip through, though I will say right now that my handwriting was terrible. I don't think I can write very well with the pen that I'm using, this Copic fine liner. I need to use a better pen for my hand because it kind of hurts to write with it for me. And I was struggling to write nicely, so please don't read any of my... In the flip through at the end, don't read any of the words if you don't want to be spoiled, but also to save me some embarrassment. But anyway, I wasn't being too precious with it, I just wanted to get my thoughts down. But yeah, so yeah, God Emperor of Dune, I enjoyed the beginning and I enjoyed the ending, scenes were really good. I loved the concept. So Dune through Children of Dune is just the story of Paul, and it's in that time frame. And then God Emperor of Dune is actually set 3,000 years in the future. I was going to try and put this meme in here of I'm in the skin which is not my own, which is a God Emperor reference, but I decided it just messed with the layout too much, and that I would just keep it sort of, I don't know, give Dune a little bit more respect, although I feel like you could fill it with memes at this point. But yeah, it's 3,000 years in the future, and the whole middle of the book, I was just like, this is unnecessary pontificating, pseudo-intellectual stuff for me. I know a lot of people really enjoy the philosophical discussions in that. I'm not one of those. I found it, maybe I'm too woke, as they say. I found a lot of it very insulting. And then Heretics of Dune and Chapter House Dune were more interesting to me because they are focused on the Bene Gesserit. If you've seen the movie or know about that, it's like a priesthood of women, basically, witches, I guess. But those books are focused on the Bene Gesserit, and so there's way more female characters as the main characters. But the sexism kind of just gets worse. Just gets worse and worse, and I know by the end I was like, oh, but I did rate them higher because I felt overall the action sequences and the overall story arc was more interesting, especially than God Emperor, but there was a lot of aged issues for me. Here I'm just checking my book log to remember what stars I gave everything, which is nice to have. But overall, I did enjoy Dune, and I'm glad I read all of them, but I'm also Also because it's considered like the Lord of the Rings of sci-fi. But I'm going to say I think Lord of the Rings is better. But I definitely think the first 3 books are interesting enough to read. And then you might as well just have fun reading the next 3 if you're still interested. But when I read the actual proper endings written by Brian, I was like, oh, I don't know. It felt very fan service, very Rise of Skywalker, which I won't get into. But I still enjoyed them. But yeah, I know it was interesting to read, and I enjoy very much the movies. So, and I enjoyed a lot of the scenes in Children of Dune, especially with Aaliyah. So in this page, I did a couple of these pages where I did a collage in Photoshop and printed it out on sticker paper, just to make my life a bit more easy, because I didn't have a lot of things to decorate, like an expanse page. So I don't have a lot of space stickers actually. And I really wanted to capture the expanse feeling because I loved this. This is my page for the last 4 books, although I did also read novellas. But these are the ones that I read this year, I believe. I think I was reading all the other ones prior to 2024. This is the last 4 books, and I will put in some different SPC sticker for so the other one I didn't use any SPC stickers, but I will bring in her like bar rating stickers. You'll see them instead of stars or other shapes, they're just like a bar with 5 pieces, because I thought that would go with this theme really well. I'm trying to do like a sci-fi look that matches the Expanse. They're completely useless because all of this is 5 stars. The Expanse was basically all 5 stars for me, except for a couple of the novellas that I wasn't so into. The main one being Gods of Risk. Although I did enjoy the episode on the TV show that did Gods of Risk. Yeah, I love the TV show. I love the books. And I think I actually loved these last 3 books the most, which is kind of sad because the TV show ends at Babylon's Ashes and it doesn't actually adapt the last 3 books. But the last 3 books are after like I think it's like a 30-year time jump. So maybe in the future they will go back with the original actors and do the last 3 books because they are supposed to be older. But yeah, I really loved this last trilogy. There are 9 books, and they're basically set in, there's like 3 trilogies basically, in terms of story arcs, with one overall arc, which is completed in this last 3 of them. But yeah, I really loved the last 3, and I think the stakes were so much higher. You can see I was considering the stars. And I was like, well, they're all 5 stars, so why bother? But then I will bring in the bar design instead. And now I'm considering here, like, what else should I add to this? And I was like, I'm going to do a cool little sci-fi design across the top of the boxes to sort of bring it in. And then I did a graph background, and I thought that added sort of an interesting look as well in the sci-fi feels, and sort of bring in some more blue color. Although I'm going to use my Purple Mist Tombow to bring in a bluish purple to go with the, to tie into the collage next to it. But yeah, I will say, I don't want to, obviously I can't talk about these last 4 books without spoiling things. Unless you've seen the TV show and finished it, you would know how Babylon's Ashes ends. But yeah, I just really enjoyed the ride, and everything just like kicks up a notch in these last 3. There's like so much tension. Although I completely misremembered, I thought there was a death scene in Persepolis Rising, but it's actually in Tiamat's Wrath in the 2nd book. So I wrote it in my review, but then I put brackets around it like it's not supposed to be in this book. It's been a while since I finished them. But yet so much tense action scenes, and just even like now we're like way more into high sci-fi here because we have interdimensional beings basically, and it's really cool, and lots of different alien planets. So because the books kind of start off with just like in the solar system, and then it grows. And then the very ending of the last book, I feel like some people disagree with the ending of the book, but I found it it's bittersweet. Like, it's not a happy ending. And it's kind of ironic considering what the main character Holden has to choose to do compared to like his character growth, his character decisions through the whole series. But I feel like it's part of his sort of growth that he has to do what he does. Anyway, I bawled my eyes out, and then even a couple of weeks afterwards when I thought of the ending, I started tearing up again. I was very invested in these characters, and I will also say I loved the audiobooks read by Jefferson Mays. His voice just kind of made it for me. But yeah, I know. The Expanse was just like one of those old-time series for me. And I really enjoyed finishing it. I didn't get to include the very last novella because there is a novella that takes place after Leviathan Falls. And I thought that was really good as well. That was also kind of bittersweet and leaves a lot open. But it was nice to see sort of a little bit of a prologue there kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I loved The Expanse, and I love the TV show as well, and I thought it ended well too, even though it ends on the this Babylon's Ashes here instead of Leviathan Falls. But you know, they were working with budget constraints, and the show got saved. It used to be on Sci-Fi, and then it went to Amazon. So you know, not everything can like go forever and finish it all off. But I think it had a good ending the way it was, and then it leaves you totally open. They didn't change the ending, so you can just go straight into the last 3 books and continue reading if you want to. But it also means they could do the show again, so that's pretty nice. But yeah, I brought in those bar stickers because I thought they added to the look of the sci-fi feel. And I just saw this like blue grid added to sort of like a computer screen look, which I really liked. But we're just going to color those bars completely in because they're all 5 stars. Yeah. If you're looking for some good modern sci-fi, I do love The Expanse. I feel like it's mostly also about character work. That's really important for me. We have a couple of pieces of fan art in the collage too, which I will link down below. But it's mostly stuff from the TV show. I love these characters so much. They're so great. So that was my Expanse spread. I also want to add on that The Expanse, I feel like there's a lot of really interesting discussions in the last 3 books, especially about colonialism and insurgencies and a lot of pertinent discussions to what we're going through today, especially I felt a lot of some of the speeches were very close to feelings about Palestine. So I'd say that, it was very interesting and pertinent to read about that in a good way, in an affirming way. So I also enjoyed the politics that they included in The Expanse. And there's a lot of politics about, groups of people who've been oppressed, who've been colonized, who've been used by corporations, which I think is a lot of sci-fi goes into that, but I thought The Expanse does it well. Anyway, so we'll go into the next slot. So the next 2 open pages, but next 4 pages are related books. These are the 2 prequel books. So this is the Fall of Illyrian trilogy by Martha Wells. And but there's a trilogy, but then there's 2 prequel books that you don't have to read them, but I would say in my personal experience, you should definitely read them before you get into the trilogy, because I thought they were actually better than the trilogy, and also there's so many references to these in the trilogy, and some of the there's like payoffs, the payoffs that you need for some of the like twists and turns and surprises don't really work unless you've read both prequels, because even there's like a twist like reveal in the second book here, the Death of the Necromancer, which you need to actually have any interest in that surprise. You should have had read the Element of Fire. So I would say just treat the Illyrian books as 5-book series and read all 5 of them because they are really, really fun. So this is a fantasy world. The Element of Fire was written in the 90s, so they're fairly old. They go from the 90s into the 2000s. And I know a lot of people read Martha Wells for Murderbot Diaries, which I have been reading, but also her newer fantasy book, Witch King, which I personally really enjoyed, and I can't wait for the next one next year. Although I know a lot of people didn't think it's that good, but I really enjoyed it. So I thought I'd check out one of her older fantasy series. She has another one apart from this, but my partner Locke already had the trilogy books on Kindle. So I thought I'd go into this, but decided to read the prequel books first. And so this first one is the Element of Fire. The books all take place in the same fantasy world, and the main place we go to is Illyrian and the city of Vienne. There's other countries around it, but this is where our main focus is for our protagonists. And the Element of Fire, I was instantly sucked in. The opening scene is so cool. So in this world, you have the Fae, so like actual like folklore Fae of fairies, and they hate iron, and there's like all sorts of kinds of Fae that are like goblins and fairies and things like that. But you also have sorceresses and sorcerers, wizards, which are the sort of the main magic, really, the sorcery. And the Element of Fire kind of it's set in a Elizabethan, Shakespearean kind of world, like Jacobean. So you have rapiers, and you can see in the pictures that I downloaded from Pinterest that really like connect to that time period. And you've got a castle, and our main protagonist is Thomas, who is the Queen's guard, the head of the Queen's guard. He's also everyone knows that he's basically the lover of the Queen Ravenna. She is long widowed, and her son she's now more of like a dowager queen. Her son's really come into being a king, but obviously Thomas is still the Queen's guard. And the son has like a pesky favorite who's like politically kind of annoying. And then you also have his long lost sister, who is not Ravenna's child. The king before Roland is Ravenna's son's name. The king prior had an affair with a fairy queen, and they had a half-fae child called Cade, or Katie, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but she sort of like was banished because, she's a crafty little fae princess, and the story kind of comes in that she comes back to court because she has unfinished business basically with her family and her brother. And I don't want to get too into it, but yeah, it's super interesting. I love the way the magic is set up, especially in the first scenes where they're going through a house that has, they believe a runaway evil sorcerer has kidnapped someone there, and the house is all filled with sorcery, and it's so cool the way it's described. But we have rogue sorcerers, we have the castle wards being destroyed that protect it from the Fae, so the Fae attack, and we have Thomas and we have Katie as our main sort of characters here. And there's some court intrigue, and there's some Fae battles and sorcery battles, and I really, really enjoyed it. Thought it was super fun. So I was like, okay, we're on to the next book, which is The Death of the Necromancer. And I had no idea what these books were about leading into reading them. So I was like, okay, the next one, The Death of the Necromancer, actually takes place a couple hundred years later. Still at Illyrian, but now it's like a Victorian kind of feeling world. You've got the beginning of electricity. You have the very, very beginnings of electricity. You still have horses and carts. And our main character is Nicholas. And well, that's the other thing, is like it's a world of sorcery and magic, but pretty much all of our protagonists are not magical. They're just sort of trying to live in this magical world, and they are surrounded by it and have to work through the story with him. So Nicholas, he is also not magical, but one of the other protagonists who hangs out with him is Madeline, and she has latent powers, although she never trained properly. So you're born with sorcery, but if you don't train with it, you can kind of lose it as an adult. But he is basically a con artist, and he was taken in by a foster parent who was an art collector and also dabbled in a bit of sorcery. He wasn't sorceress either, but he had close friends who were sorcerers, and he actually gets taken in and executed for necromancy, which is obviously illegal. But then it's found out later after he's executed that he was innocent. He never did any necromancy. And Nicholas, of course, is wanting revenge years later, still wanting to avenge his foster father. And he's become a con artist who changes his looks. He dresses up in different costumes and pretends to be different men, so no one can relate him back to being Nicholas, who is he's also an art dealer, basically, like his foster father. So no one knows that he's, doing all these deeds, but one of his best friends is Arisilda, who's one of the most, strongest wizards ever known, who is actually he's an opium addict. So he's kind of out of the picture at this point because, after the execution of their mutual sort of friend and uncle foster parent, he delves into opium and isn't living up to his wizardness anymore. But you see this whole you have this avenging story, but there's also a story about a necromancer coming back and doing necromancy, and it's like a whole mystery and it's super fun. So I had to use some cool images of this necromancer that I found. But this is actually, the next page here is coming into the proper trilogy, The Fall of Illyrian, which starts with the Wizard Hunters, and then we have Ships of Air. And I did finish the trilogy, although I just ended up doing the Gate of Gods review just in my September section. So I didn't have a full page for that. But yeah, so in this extension, it's now just a couple of decades later. I think it's only 20 to 30 years later from the death of the necromancer. And our protagonist is actually a woman named Tremaine. And the world is kind of it's like Blitz London, sort of World War I vibes. You got the start of cars and electric lights and radios. And Illyrian has been attacked by a mysterious force called the Guardier. And they don't know where they come from. They just magically appear, but they have airships. And they also have magic that actually can't be countered by their sorcerers. So they're extremely effective, and they're just bombing Illyrian. And we find Tremaine at the home of where Nicholas lived, and we find out that she's actually Nicholas's daughter. Although Nicholas has, he and Arisilda disappeared years ago, doing some sorcery for the military against the Guardier, basically. And we have it's just a whole story of traveling into other worlds where the Guardier come from. And then we also have our second protagonist, which is Ilias, and he lives in this other world that they end up traveling to, which is a world where wizards are actually seen as evil, and most of them are evil. And the first book here is mostly set on a place called the Isle of Storms, which is a dark, cavernous wizardry island where the Guardier have been sending their airships from there to Illyrian. So they've traveled there to see what are the Guardier about, because they have no idea who they are. And then you've got Ilias and him traveling through, and they don't actually have the same language. So a lot of the book is actually, when they finally meet up, the Tremaine and Ilias, is them trying to guess what each other is saying, because they can't speak the same language, which is actually really fun. I really liked how that worked. But yeah, they're stuck in this Isle of Storms. and not to get into it, obviously you want to continue reading for the next books, but for Ships of Air, you obviously got a lot more about the airships from the Gardier, and I found this really cool fan art of Tremaine holding. So you have these wizard spheres where you basically someone without magic, which Tremaine doesn't have magic and neither does Ilias. But if you hold this sphere, and this one was made by Arasilda, you actually are able to do magic using this sphere. So, and this is also a big part of Death of the Necromancer, is the beginning of those magic spheres. But they become very important in the trilogy. But then the second book, of course, you got more about the Ships of Air, but I also use this really cool tape of water from Notebook Therapy, this pet tape you can see down below, and it sort of represents how there's actually a lot more to do with the ocean and the sea. In the second and third book, we spend a lot of time on a ship, which is actually named after the queen from The Element of Fire, which is hilarious, so you can see those sort of callbacks. I won't spoil the rest of the books, but I will say I didn't love the Ships of Air and Garden Gate as much because I felt like the characters changed in the second book and not for the better for me. Basically, there's one point where things happen and it makes Tremaine, she's like, oh, I'm going manic from this response, and I feel like she never leaves that. And I feel like in the first book, there's a lot more camaraderie and interest in a lot of characters. Like we have Gerard and Florian and Niles, a bunch of different sorcerers. And in the second and third book, it becomes kind of like a high school clique between Tremaine, Ilias, and his cousin. And they are against everybody else. And it's frustrating. It's so a super immature thing. It's you're in the war and you're being immature to the colonel. I don't know, if they just disagree with everyone, they hate everyone else, and the story really becomes the clique of those three characters, and I don't agree with it. I feel like it's very immature. But I still gave them good marks because I thought I still loved the overall arching story. It's just after that point, I kind of didn't really like Tremaine or Ilias that much anymore. And we lost a lot of the characters along the way that I really liked, like Gerard and Florian. So those are the only downsides. But now I'm going to do the final lot of pages here, which is my Stormlight archive reread. And this is by Brandon Sanderson. And I'll have as much of that fan art listed below as I can, because this is obviously all fan art. Although a couple of pieces are actually from the RPG game that's coming out by Brotherwise Games. Yeah, a couple of those are actually from the upcoming RPG game, which I'm so happy about because I always want more art of Stormlight Archive. So of course we have 4 books here, and I reread all of them in preparation for the 5th book coming out this December, Wind and Truth, because I first read all of these in 2022, and I needed a refresher because these are big books. I read them always in audiobook form. I really do enjoy the narrators, although I do set them at 1.2 times speed because they do talk a bit slow for me. But the first book, which is the shortest one, is 45 hours long. So they're long books. So I felt like I need to reread them before I read Wind and Truth because there's so much in them. And it was kind of hard to do I tried to do some writing about them here, but it was kind of hard because you can't really talk about everything, especially in one tiny little box for all 4 of them. But I will say again, these are basically all 5-star reads and probably my favorite Brandon Sanderson books. I've read most of them now, though I will say in terms of his more standalone secret projects, I think my favorite was Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. Although I know everyone's really into reading Tress of the Emerald Sea. I love that one too. But I think out of those releases last year, I preferred Yumi and the Nightmare Painter. Love it so much. And then in terms of the Mistborn books, I think I actually prefer Era 2 with Wax and Wayne more than Era 1. Although Era 1 is outstanding. But And I kind of love the Wax and Wayne books a bit more. So yeah, I guess out of all of them, Stormlight Archive is like the most that I think about. Like I think about these books constantly and like what some theories and different like details could be, especially in rereading. I noticed a lot more things because his Cosmere universe is all connected. There's some connections to the Mistborn books in here and just little bits and pieces that I hadn't noticed before. Especially in the interludes, actually. So I enjoyed rereading all of it. And I suppose the only thing is I feel like Rhythm of War was the only one I had issues with, is that it's too long, I think. It's really, really long. Rhythm of War, the last one. And there's just so much that happens. Like, I love everything when the siege begins, because it's basically a siege book. But I totally forgot that there was so much stuff that happens before the siege begins. Like, so much stuff. I was like, what the heck? I thought this was entirely siege, but it wasn't. And this spread is going to be very simple. I'm just going to put some lines here again with my Purple Mist Tombow just to pull in the colors. Yeah. There's probably no need to talk too much about Stormlight Archive, but basically it is huge epic fantasy. A lot of stuff is happening. The villains are extremely grey, and I feel like there's not really good or bad guys 100% either way, except for one person, which is kind of fun and interesting, especially when we start getting point of views on what we are quoted as supposed to be the villains, especially in the Way of Kings. And I feel like at the heart of it is really about the characters, and it's really about their personal journey and growth, and especially them overcoming different mental illness. And I just really, really love that. I love Stormlight Archive. It's so good. So we'll do a little flip through here. Please, yes, ignore my horrible writing and don't read anything because there are spoilers throughout. But I wanted to show you what it looked like all filled in. And I think it looks so fun, and I'm so happy that my reading journal is almost complete. I just have 2 more pages left to do. And these I'm doing tracking pages for Wheel of Time series and also for the Cosmere from Brandon Sanderson. Yeah, so this is the majority done, and I love the way it came out. But if you like this journaling video, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. I'm just trying to show you the beautiful pet tape here with the waves from Notebook Therapy. But yeah, so don't forget to do that, and leave a comment down below. You could leave, I don't know, an emoji of your choosing. Maybe like a space emoji, because I have a lot of sci-fi in here. Otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. I love you. Bye bye.